Good evening, this is Brass Tacks. I'm Zakir Jacob. The governors of a dozen states were changed by the Modi government, but one in particular has been the subject of a big political attack. Retired Supreme Court Judge S. Abdul Nazeer was appointed governor of Andhra Pradesh, but the opposition has taken exception to it, saying that he's being rewarded for being part of the Ram Janmabhoomi judgment bench. Justice Nazeer has been part of many benches and judgments, and in many cases he's also been the dissenting judge. Why is the opposition overlooking his competence to occupy high constitutional office like that of the governor? Or should the government have taken heed and given off a cooling off period of at least 6 months before appointing a judge as governor? Or are these post-retirement posts now being a lure for members of the Supreme Court? But first, the story.
People who have served in the apex judiciary, should they be accepting such post-retirement sinecures?
जिन्होंने आपके बारे में फेवर किया, उनको कुछ ना कुछ फेवर आप कर रहे हो.
Congress party itself had laid down the convention of giving positions to the retired judges. Some allegations on such appointment, I think it is not proper on the part of any political party.
अगर कोर्ट में फैसला पक्ष में नहीं आया तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट को गाली देगा, उसकी आलोचना कर देगा.
So a governor is appointed or dismissed by the President of India, and since the President acts on the aid and advice of the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers, in effect, the governor is appointed and removed by the central government. There are certain conditions laid down in Articles 157 and 158 to appoint a president. They have to be citizens of India, they should be at least 35 years of age, they cannot be members of parliament or any state legislature, and they must not hold any other office of profit at the time of appointment as governor. Now, Justice Nazeer's appointment as governor of Andhra Pradesh is not the first such instance. In fact, it is the fourth such case in the history of independent India. He was appointed as governor of Andhra Pradesh about a month or so after he retired as a Supreme Court judge. Back in 2014, Justice Sadasivam was appointed as governor of the state of Kerala just months after he had retired as the Chief Justice of India. Justice Fatima Bibi, way back in the 90s, was made governor of the state of Tamil Nadu by the H.D. Devegowda government. This was back in 1997. This was 5 years after her retirement from the Supreme Court. And Justice Syed Fazal Ali was made governor of Odisha a month after he retired as the Supreme Court judge in 1952, and later as Assam governor when Jawaharlal Nehru was Prime Minister. Then there is, of course, the case of Justice Hidayatullah, who served as the acting president while he was still the Chief Justice of India. The first time happened to be in 1969, when then President Zakir Hussain passed away while he was in office. Then Vice President V.V. Giri assumed the president's office as acting president, but in order to contest for the 1969 presidential elections, V.V. Giri had to resign from both positions, and Justice Hidayatullah was elevated as president. Then again in 1982, when President Zail Singh travelled to the United States for a heart surgery, Justice Hidayatullah once again served as acting president of India for a few weeks. Now, Justice Nazeer was elevated to the Karnataka High Court bench at a very early age of 45. He spent 14 years at the High Court before his appointment as a Supreme Court judge on the proposal of a collegium that was led by then Chief Justice of India J.S. Keher. This was back in 2017. Justice Nazeer was not even a Chief Justice at a High Court when he was elevated to the Apex Court. He was the fourth senior most amongst the judges of the High Courts at that point of time. He went on to be part of several momentous judgments delivered by the Supreme Court. He was, of course, part of the bench on the Ayodhya Babri Masjid dispute case, which delivered a unanimous verdict on allowing construction of Ram Mandir at the disputed site. He led the Constitution bench on demonetization, which upheld the note ban decision as valid. He was also part of the bench which ruled in the K.S. Puttaswamy case. This is the famous Aadhaar case. It held that right to privacy was a fundamental right. He also led the Constitution bench, which held that additional restrictions not found in Article 19(2) cannot be imposed on the right to free speech of ministers or legislators. There are also notable judgments in which Justice Nazeer was a dissenting voice, like when the Supreme Court brought down the curtains on the 1,000-year-old practice of triple talaq amongst Muslims. Along with the then CJI Justice Kehar, Justice Nazeer had noted that talaq-e-biddat is a matter of personal law of Sunni Muslims, and that being a component of personal law, it has protection under Article 25 of the Constitution. He also noted that triple talaq among Muslims was an integral part of their religion and faith, and it cannot be dismissed as unconstitutional. At the most, he said in his judgment, that it can be called gender discriminatory practice that can be done away by way of legislation. Before he agreed with the unanimous verdict of the Ayodhya bench, he had earlier dissented against the majority view that refused to refer the issue to a larger bench. In September of 2018, a three-judge Supreme Court bench, in a majority opinion 2-1, declined to refer the question if a mosque as a place of prayer is an essential part of Islam. Justice Nazeer observed that the question of what is essential or not essential in a religion cannot be decided hastily. He held that the question raised on the essentiality of offering prayers in mosques should be examined by a 7-judge bench before the Ayodhya suit appeals are heard. So let's take a look at where the 5 judges who were part of that historic bench which delivered the verdict in the Ayodhya Ram Janmabhoomi case, where are they today? Justice Ashok Bhushan, he retired as a Supreme Court judge in July of 2021. 4 months later, in November, he was appointed as the chairperson of the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal. Justice Sharad Arvind Bobde retired as Chief Justice of India in 2021. He has not held any public office after retiring. Justice Ranjan Gogoi, who was the head of that bench, he retired as the Chief Justice in November of 2019. 4 months later, he was nominated by the President and appointed as a member of the Rajya Sabha. Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, who's the current Chief Justice of India, he'll be in office till November 2024. And finally, fifth on that 5-judge bench was Justice Nazeer, who's now been appointed as the Governor of Andhra Pradesh. Now, the opposition is up in arms, alleging a quid pro quo between the centre and judges, taking the case of Justice Nazeer.
If you recall, a former Chief Justice of India was also appointed as the governor of a state. Similarly, there have been, from time to time, concerns which have been articulated. Some of them which you referred to with regard to what late Mr. Arun Jaitley had said, whether people who have served in the apex judiciary, should they be accepting such post-retirement sinecures? It is a serious question which needs to be debated.
गोगोई साहब को भी राज्यसभा का सदस्य बनाया, जिन्होंने अयोध्या के मसले पर निर्णय दिया था. अब बुरी बात यह लगती है कि वो न्याय था या फेवरिज्म था. ऐसा नहीं सोचना चाहिए ना. ये सोच आएगी क्योंकि आप बदले में कुछ दे रहे हैं इन लोगों को, जिन्होंने आपके बारे में फेवर किया, उनको कुछ ना कुछ फेवर आप कर रहे हो. न्याय व्यवस्था पर लांछन ही है.
Here are some instances now when the Congress was in power, it had given governmental or constitutional posts to judges immediately after retirement. Justice K.G. Balakrishnan was appointed as the chairperson of the National Human Rights Commission barely a month after he retired. Justice A.K. Ganguly was appointed head of West Bengal's Human Rights Panel. This was in March 2012, again a month or so after retiring. Justice M. Sharma was cleared as the chief of a Vansadhara water dispute tribunal just 4 months before he retired. Justice L.S. Panta was appointed as chairperson of the National Green Tribunal after retiring as a Supreme Court judge. So let me now open this up to our guests who are joining us. Nalin Kohli, BJP spokesperson, joining us. Ghanshyam Tiwari, spokesperson of the Samajwadi Party. Sanjay Jha, former leader of the Congress Party. And Aman Lekhi is former ASG and senior advocate. Nalin Kohli, what the opposition is saying is this is some kind of a quid pro quo, that judges are being given post-retirement posts like that of governor should not be encouraged. They're even quoting the late Arun Jaitley, who said in Parliament that judges are now keeping a keen eye on these post-retirement sinecures.
We should thank at least the Congress and the opposition to find at least some intellectual bandwidth within the BJP and its former leader, Mr. Arun Jaitley, since they themselves seem to be battling political bankruptcy in terms of ideas. What they are saying is ridiculous, must be condemned, is absolutely inaccurate. The first such appointment, as you pointed out, was Justice Fazal Ali by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru in 1952, 1 month after his appointment. So was that some pro quo? Absolutely not. Number two is that this argument that's being taken about, this is a reward is also a weak argument, a specious argument for three reasons. This is an argument because the Congress party and the opposition tends to blame even the election commission for being in the pocket of the BJP. But when they win elections, they find them to be fair. The same they seem to be doing with judgments. Every time they like a judgment, then the judiciary is impartial. Every time they don't like a judgment for political reasons, not for judicial reasons, then they tend to look at it as if the judiciary is not impartial. So these arguments of convenience have to have a line. And I think this line is being breached again and again by the Congress and other parties.
Okay.
And they need to reflect on what they are saying before they make these attacks in a blatant manner. Two things to bring up before I close this argument is that certain positions are not rewards. They require a former Supreme Court judge to be appointed as the person heading that tribunal. For example, you mentioned about the National Green Tribunal, the NGT.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, in that case, it's normally a Supreme Court judge who goes there. So therefore, I think to be treating that as a reward or by someone making such an argument is incorrect. So I think close this, I would feel that Justice Nazeer, who's been appointed as governor, is holding another constitutional position. He took the oath of the Constitution as every judge in a constitutional court. Here he'll be taking the oath of the Constitution as governor.
Yeah, and as an expert on the Constitution, as an interpreter of the Constitution, as a judge, he is best placed to be, or at least fit to be, in a constitutional office. Let me ask Ghanshyam Tiwari this. The question of precedent, I outlined this in 2014, Justice Sadasivam, after being the CJI within six months of his retirement, he was appointed as governor of Kerala. Justice Fatima Bibi, when the H.D. Devegowda government was ruling in the centre, Fatima Bibi, the first woman judge of the Supreme Court, she was appointed as governor of Tamil Nadu. Justice Syed Fazal Ali was made governor of Orissa a month after he retired, and then again governor of Assam. All of this while Jawaharlal Nehru was prime minister. So there is precedent. So why are you going after the BJP and the case of Justice Nazeer being appointed as governor of Andhra Pradesh when the Congress, while it was in power, and other parties, while they were in power, have done exactly the same thing?
Good evening, Zaka, to you, the view.
Disconnect.
All right, I think we've lost Ghanshyam Tiwari's audio. We'll try and fix that in a moment. Sanjay Jha, you want to take that?
Zaka, first and foremost, I think it's important to set the context for this conversation. It's a very serious debate, in my opinion. Number one, you are living in times when this government is openly threatening the Supreme Court of India on the basic structure of the Constitution itself. So the first point I want to highlight here is that while we are talking about, the flagrant, violation of constitutional protocols, let us accept the reality that the BJP is going hammer and tongs at the very fundamental nature of the Indian Constitution and is taking on the Supreme Court. Number two, it's been unprecedented when Mr. Modi has been the prime minister. You have had the very embarrassing spectacle of 4 judges of the Supreme Court publicly stating that India's democracy is in danger and implicitly implying that even the Supreme Court of India, the august, shall we say, epicenter of justice, being compromised as far as benches were concerned. I mean, this is really political immorality or judicial intervention happening at an abysmal level. Now, let me answer this question. I do believe that if there is a judge who is competent, they may be given roles, but there should be a cooling off period. That's a first consideration.
Okay.
Because, if you look at Mr. Gogoi's judgments, within months he's accommodated in the Rajya Sabha. You mentioned another Chief Justice of India, who we all know gave a verdict in the Amit Shah, fake encounter case, and he was immediately given the job of a governor in the state of Kerala. Now, these are sending wrong signals to ordinary citizens of India, because who do the people really turn to? The executive and the politicians fail you. The only hope the people of India have is the courts.
Okay.
And if the Supreme Court gets questioned, we are in deep trouble.
Okay, so let me ask Ghanshyam Tiwari. I think his line has been patched back now. Ghanshyam Tiwari, on the question of precedent, when the opposition says, oh, this is unprecedented, that's not quite the case. From Fazal Ali to Fatima Bibi to Sadasivam, this has happened in the past. So why is Justice Nazeer being singled out?
Good evening, Zaka, to you, the viewers and fellow co-panelists. If we let BJP get away with murderous attempts on our democracy by the fake logic of precedence, then every future rapist has a precedence in Bilkis Bano case and will be emboldened. BJP has no place to hide when it hides behind precedence, because the party will look at every wrongdoing in the past or every exception in the past and use it to subvert democracy. Whether it is fighting the current judicial system, which was taken head-on by the Vice President in his maiden speech in the Parliament, whether it is communicating that while in Gujarat model one could get away with murder as was public perception, now the public perception will be you can get away with judgment. Here is the example. In the beginning of this program, you read out the judgments of Justice Nazeer.
Yeah.
He has a 20-year-old judicial record, maybe more. And now, because of BJP, because of their design to subvert democracy, his 20-year-old career will be looked from the prism of whether this is favoritism or not. And this is what BJP wants to achieve. That if you are in the court, you will fight the government and the government will take you on from every aspect, whether it is appointment of judges or your own stature as a judge. And if you are retiring, then the government will create a situation where your entire career will be suspect.
But Ghanshyam, who is looking at these judges from prism of just one judgment? Isn't the opposition looking at him just from the prism of the Ram Janmabhoomi judgment?
Well,
like I said, he was the dissenting judge in the Triple Talaq matter.
If you look at the press today and the discussion on this, everyone is looking at his entire career and looking at this as a conclusive move in his career. This is exactly what happened to Ranjan Gogoi. Every such appointment, Justice Mishra, you look at every appointment of a Supreme Court judge that this BJP makes. First of all, the role of governor in BJP, Mr. Koshyari, was let go. He has the brazen and infamy of getting up at 5:30 a.m. to give Mr. Fadnavis an oath which was completely against the spirit of constitution.
Anyway, that's
office
we're
of
deviating
governor
from the topic.
is already in BJP's instrument today to subvert democracy, and now judiciary will be another instrument.
Let me ask Aman Lekhi, whether it is the Human Rights Commission or National Green Tribunal, as Nalin also outlined a moment ago, those are, the requirements are that it be headed by a former judge. But when it comes to the post of governor, do you reckon that there should be a cooling off period, or B, that judges should not, this carrot of a post-retirement benefit or a post-retirement office should not be dangled before judges, because that could potentially influence them, at least the people who are on the benches right now. They could, the famous Arun Jaitley quote from Parliament was also about that. The judges are now thinking about post-retirement perks and office.
Well, I feel a good judge has done disservice to himself. This is a facet of what I would call a revolving door policy in politics, and reciprocal privileges which need to be avoided because they seem to give the suggestion that judgments are political capital. Now, I don't join the comments of some political parties which seem to undermine the judgments rendered by the Supreme Court to suggest that they are any less valid because Justice Nazeer has been made governor. I think that's sheer politics, and courts don't decide matters on these bases. This is purely some petty talk which is there. So I don't subscribe to that. That said, I feel perception is important, and if by reason of this appointment there is an option for a person to think that what is suspected is true, then that affects the institutional credibility, and the judge in question should have actually thought it out before accepting this particular appointment. You have mentioned instances of the past and called them precedent. What in constitutional law we deal is not precedent but convention. And when you deal with convention, you don't count the number of times something has happened in the past. What you see is whether there is worth in what has happened and whether what has happened is right. And ironically, this is what no one is talking about, Justice Nazeer himself is a co-author of a judgment which deals with what conventions are and adopts Ivor Jennings' concept of what conventions are, dealing with three facets. One, that it has happened. Two, when it has happened, it is believed it should have happened. And three, it should not have instrumental but a normative basis. So merely because there have been 8 instances in the past of judges being appointed as governor, that doesn't necessarily justify a 9th instance. Unless the appointment is justified. And here the question comes of political morality. And why I say, people talk about provision of the constitution, say there is no bar. Because there is no bar, it doesn't necessarily mean that the absence of the bar permits any action. Because in the gap or in the absence is the requirement of restraint. And restraint is absolutely imperative for constitutional ethics. This is a question of constitutional ethics. And because the question of constitutional ethics, the enforcer is not law, the enforcer is conscience. So it depends upon the person, merely because there is a permissive possibility by reason of want of restraint, doesn't necessarily mean that if an avenue is opened, that option is taken. Because insofar as the judge is concerned.
Let me ask Nalin Kohli that just because there are precedents doesn't mean that it needs to be followed. And B, in this case, it's more convention and less precedent. And how would you respond to Aman Lekhi's point about this lacks constitutional ethics or political morality, as he put it, because a good judge gets tainted by way of this decision and his acceptance of the same?
I think, first of all, I'm not going to join into a debate with my good friend Aman Lekhi, whom I personally respect and like a lot. But because you see, there are two different debates happening at the same time. One is a political debate in which my other colleagues are sitting, and therefore I am going to aggressively attack those points. The second is at a different level, an intellectual level, which is what Aman Bhai is taking the debate towards. But let me come back to 2 or 3 points that came up before he spoke. I found it a little bit funny also that while Mr. Jha, Sanjay was raising the argument of democracy being in danger when Supreme Court judges went out in a press conference, one of the people was in that press conference was Mr. Chief Justice eventually, Ranjan Gogoi, who now is a Rajya Sabha member, and they used the same argument about democracy being in danger against him. Now, having a point of view doesn't change anything. I think everyone, including Mr. Jha and the others, or even Ghanshyam, they're raising a point of view. Democracy permits us to have even strong points of view. And I don't see any harm in that. But what I'm taking exception to are 3 things. A is the politics of convenience, where the Congress party and the opposition parties, when something suits them, they immediately raise the institution or the person to the altar of magnificence. That this is how it should function. The minute they don't like something, the same person or institution is dropped to the nadi or to the depths of, attack. That this is an institution that has lost its credibility and we are unhappy. And that's why I gave the example of the Election Commission. That they have run down the election commissioners on a number of occasions. But then every time they win an election, the Election Commission is good. So I think the problem is not with the Election Commission, but with the fact that they need to get votes. And votes come from the electors, people, voters, citizens. The same is the argument here. On a given day, a judge will look at 50, 60 cases. On a non-miscellaneous day, probably 15. But that judgment will finally be in favor or against someone. You can't build a case against judges or the institution based on the fact that judgments that you like or you believe, yes, this is how it should have been, happened, so the judge is good. And judgments that didn't go your way, at the end of the day, you say the judge is wrong. The Ayodhya case had to be decided. It had to be decided one day.
The Congress party prevented that decision from happening on every occasion. Finally, when it was to be decided, someone would have sat on the bench and someone would have ruled on it. That bench happened to include 5 people, and they decided unanimously. The same people have differed against the government on different occasions. So what is this? How do you then create a judgment against a judge, like Justice Nazeer today in this case, saying that today he seems biased or there's a question of morality on him, but when he ruled against the government or he ruled on something strongly, then he seemed very good.
So can I ask Sanjay Jha that by picking just one judgment, aren't you doing a disservice to the judge? I mean, he was, like I said, the dissenting judge in the triple talaq verdict. He also was the one who said that the matter of whether a mosque is an essential or worshipping in a mosque is an essential practice of Islam, or whether having a mosque is fundamental to Islam. He was the one who said, again, he was a dissenting judge. He wanted to refer it to a larger bench. He was part of the Puttaswamy judgment, which upheld privacy as a fundamental right. So when there are judgments that, as Nalin Kohli said, judgments you like, he's a good judge, but judgments that you don't like, he's a bad judge.
Zaka, I don't want to get into the merit and demerit of various judgments he's made. I quite agree with you that many of them I personally agree with. But here is the fundamental point. Let me tell you what Mr. Lekhi said becomes very germane. The issue of perception, in my opinion. Let's bite the bullet here. Today, you and I, all of us on the panel know, I think even the viewers do, that all the gubernatorial appointments that are done are eventually nothing but political puppets at the end of the day. Look at the governors under this government in particular. You can also say it happened under the Congress time. The governors basically function as the puppet of the center. Now, here you have a situation where a Supreme Court judge is taking over the role of the governor. Don't blame the ordinary public citizen for believing that this is going to be a compromise situation. Okay. I mean, that's the hard political reality we need to accept. The second point that Nalin cannot dodge out of, he can't be so disingenuous, with due respects, that India is seeing an institutional emasculation happening at the moment. To give you just one example in which the courts have said, so many arrests have been made where the courts have said the ED actually doesn't even have a case. So you are finding today a situation where there are human rights violations, and the courts are telling the government how to behave in terms of hate speech. And the government is telling the Supreme Court that the basic structure has got to be challenged. And we are not even getting into the extremely complicated debate about the appointment of judges. So we are at the moment in an ocean of deep trouble.
So let me ask Ghanshyam Tiwari and then give the final word to Aman Lekhi after that. When it comes to, again, constitutional offices which require the services of a judge, whether it was UPA or NDA, which was in power, they've all appointed. KG Balakrishnan was appointed chairperson of the NHRC just a few months after he retired. So was Justice Ganguly of the State Human Rights Commission in Bengal. There was the instance of a number of judges being appointed as the head of the NGT and so on. So a governor's office where you will have to interpret matters of the Constitution. The governor, of course, is faced with delicate situations where the Constitution has to be interpreted. Who better qualified than somebody who has done that as his profession as a judge for the last, almost 10 years now? Since 2014, he was elevated as a judge.
From Ladakh to Delhi to Kerala to Maharashtra to Karnataka to Goa, is there a governor office that BJP has really used to showcase the strength of constitution and federal structure? To Puducherry to Tamil Nadu, is there a single government office? No. The BJP has used the governor's office to challenge the elected mandate of the Chief Minister. Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee was heckled in presence of the Prime Minister by hooligans of BJP at a constitutional ceremony. So clearly, to say that Justice Nazeer is appointed there to uphold the sanctity or constitutional sanctity of governor office is, I think, injustice to BJP, which has currently used every governor office for its political benefits and mocking the Constitution.
Okay.
I think the reality is BJP is sending a clear message.
The fact is that governors were political appointees even in the past, but be that as it may, I really have limited time, so I'm going to give Aman Lekhi the final word. You know, whether it is constitutional ethics that you talked about in the previous answer or political morality, like I said, there is no illegality in this appointment. There is, why should this take away from the track record of a good judge, as you called him?
No, absolutely. The question is not of illegality, the question is propriety. And propriety is as important a part of the legal process as is legality. Because in perception, as I pointed out, the worth of law remains. And particularly when you hold high offices and offices like the Supreme Court, some kind of austere approach, a bit Spartan approach, a bit of restraint is mandated. You have to withdraw from such places, not in fact get invited to them. And I personally feel Justice Nazeer was an exceptionally good judge. As I said in the beginning, he could have avoided this particular option and actually vindicated his position and in some way reinforced the values the Supreme Court stands for. But that did not happen. And that's because I feel as far as the individuals are concerned, it's you and I may talk, but until the choice, a right choice is exercised by the person to whom an offer is made, all our conversation is going to be futile. The test eventually depends upon the person himself.
All right. We'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Nalin Kohli, Ghanshyam Tiwari, Sanjay Jha and Aman Lekhi for joining us. We'll see how this story plays out politically, whether the opposition will continue to make this a bit of a sticking point. Meanwhile, the Chief Minister of the state, Jagan Mohan Reddy, has welcomed and said that he looks forward to working with Governor Nazeer, as in this case. Let's move on to the other story that we're tracking. The biennial Aero Show, Aero India, kicked off in Bangalore. This year is supposed to be the biggest contingent of aircraft and manufacturers as well as defense companies. There is a strong element of Make in India. The attendees are from over 90 countries and deals worth 75,000 crores are expected to be signed. The theme of this year's Aero India is the runway to 1 billion opportunities. Over the next 4 days, Asia's biggest air show will showcase India's growth in aerospace and defense capabilities. The focus of the event is to showcase indigenous equipment and technologies, as well as forging partnerships with foreign companies. This will be in line with the Make in India, Make for the World vision that's been outlined by the Modi government.
नए भारत के सामर्थ्य का साक्षी बन रहा है। बेंगलुरु का आसमान आज इस बात की गवाही दे रहा है कि नई ऊंचाई नए भारत की सच्चाई है। आज देश नई ऊंचाइयों को छू भी रहा है और उन्हें पार भी कर रहा है।
The highlight of day one was some breathtaking aerobatics and mid-air maneuvering. A plethora of aircraft of the Indian Air Force displayed their aerial prowess at the event, including the Sukhoi 30 MKIs, which dazzled the crowds with this famous loop, tumble, yaw movement. The light combat aircraft, the Tejas, the LCA, that was the highlight of this year. And on day one, it took off from the Yelahanka Air Base, performing maneuvers like the hesitation roll and a vertical pinchback. The Indian Air Force's light combat helicopter, the LCH, has also performed during the inauguration of Aero India 2023. This, of course, at the Yelahanka Air Base in Bengaluru. A stunning formation of helicopters of the Indian Air Force, the Army and the Coast Guard also took to the skies and performed some stunning aerobatics in a tri-service display of strength. Another moment from the air show that left viewers awestruck was the Indian Air Force's Suryakiran aerobatic team creating a heart shape in the sky, dedicating it to Aero India 2023. The US Air Force's newest fifth-generation fighter, two stealthy supersonic multi-role F-35As, made their debut at the Aero Show today. This is the first time that an F-35 developed by the US defense company Lockheed Martin is in India. This assumes strategic importance in the backdrop of increasing ties between India and the United States and geopolitics in the aftermath of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. At present, the F-35A is flown by about 14 air forces and navies around the world.
We are getting you an exclusive report from the Aero India, which is currently on here in Bengaluru. For the first time in the history of Aero India, we have the F-35, the fifth generation fighter jet, making its debut. There are two fighter jets here that have landed at the Elanka Air Force Station. It's considered to be the best fifth generation fighter jet. And remember, this is a single seat, single engine, and it's an all-weather stealth multi-role combat aircraft. This is developed by Lockheed Martin and has several features, which is the first, including a cutting-edge helmet-mounted display system. It also has, it's equipped for electronic warfare. It can carry out intelligence, surveillance, and also reconnaissance operations. Several reports say that there are talks that have happened between India and United States for this, which is at a very, very preliminary stage. But others saying that right now the country is focusing on ensuring the fourth generation fighters are in place. So it might be premature to talk about acquiring F-35s for India, but definitely the US, which is here in large numbers, perhaps the biggest contingent in the history of Aero India, putting up F-35 also on display, making its intent clear that it wants to be a very crucial partner, even as India looks at modernizing its defense forces. All these years, it was the F-16, which was a major point of attraction. But this time around, the F-35 here really ensuring that people coming here and also for defense personnel coming here, they get to see what a fifth generation fighter jet considered to be the best looks like.
Meanwhile, France's Rafale M and the F-18 Super Hornet of the US are locked in a stiff competition to be supplying to the Indian Navy. The manufacturers of both the aircraft claim to have satisfied the Navy during technical demonstrations. The Rafale M impressed the Indian Navy with its flawless maneuvering, while Boeing demonstrated the F-18's suitability for Indian aircraft carriers. They're both in the running for a suitable aircraft to be deployed on India's first indigenous aircraft carrier, the INS Vikrant.
The Indian Navy is looking at buying fighter jets, especially for its INS Vikrant jets that can operate from the deck of INS Vikrant. There are two contenders for it. One is the Rafale M, the other is the F-18 Super Hornet. If you compare how both of them operate, well, Super Hornet scores over Rafale in certain aspects and Rafale does same in few other aspects. Within visual range combat, the Rafale M actually would be in a very dominant position against this Super Hornet in almost all circumstances, is what experts believe. Well, the other aspect is Super Hornet is the winner when it comes to weapon options, although Rafale can carry a greater payload, is what experts say. Well, if you look at Rafale, where it scores, Rafale is also capable of super cruise, and also it is very comfortable when it goes even at a altitude of around 30,000 feet. And when it comes to range, not much differentiating between Rafale M and the Super Hornet. Both of them, in fact, are capable of mid-air refueling and have similar endurance and capabilities.
Now, this is going to be a game changer for the Indian Army. 48 jetpack suits, which are on display at the Aero Show. These may be used along the line of actual control with China as an attempt to bolster the Indian Army's overall surveillance apparatus. The UK's Royal Navy and the US Marine Corps are already using these jetpack suits, and soon we'll also be seeing our soldiers wearing these suits as part of a military modernization effort.
Jet suit can make you fly. Recently, Indian Army issued one RFP regarding procurement of 48 jet suits in Indian Army. And soon after that, people were curious as to how these jet suits will be used in Indian Army. And today, here in Aero India, we have got one display where you can see this jet suit by Absolute Composites Private Limited. What is the technology behind, and while it is about functions, so what are the functions? I'm joined by Mr. Raghav. Mr. Raghav, you tell me first of all the functionality. How we can use these jet suits, because we got to know that this particular suit can make you fly?
Yes, it can make you fly. You asked me two questions. One is the functionalities and the usability of it. So functionalities, This is powered by turbojet engines, which are fueled by diesel fuel. And you have 2 engines on the right-hand gauntlet attached, and you have 2 on the left-hand side, and 3 engines on the rear. We have a fire retardant overall, and heat insulated and also fire retardant boots, along with the safety helmet, and it would also have a noise cancellation headphones and also a mic. A person would carry somewhere in between 40 to 50 kgs based on how long he want to fly.
The Indian Army is looking for such suits, 48 such suits. So what about your part and your proposal on it?
See, it came as a pleasant surprise to us. We realized that we have to respond to it because we have the equipment ready with us, and we were just training the pilots, because pilot training, we don't get trained pilots on this because this is a new equipment. And we are formulating the course for training the pilots. This equipment is already 70% indigenous. It will be 80% indigenous when we supply, if at all we get an opportunity to supply.
This year's Aero India is touted to be the biggest in terms of exhibits, contingents, and of course a number of CEOs are attending. So let's break down the big numbers. A total of 809 defense companies from 98 countries are participating. Defense ministers of 32 countries are present for this year's Aero Show. The air chiefs of 29 countries are in Bengaluru for the event. 250 agreements are expected to be signed, which is likely to bring in investments in excess of 75,000 crores.
It's really bold and exciting Indian vision for Make in India. India is already a great country, but it's only just starting. It has huge potential, and we're delighted to be here, and we want to be at your side. We recognize that India is in the place where it wants to build its indigenous sovereign capability so that it can export weapons and arms on its terms in India's interests, because a strong India in a strong region is good for the world.
Moving on here on Brass Tacks, the death toll from the earthquake that struck Turkey and Syria has now crossed 35,000. But there is still hope amid all the despair. Rescuers today pulled out a 13-year-old alive from under the rubble of a collapsed building. This was in the southern province of Hatay, more than a week after the devastating earthquake struck. According to the United Nations, the phase of rescue is now coming to a close, with urgency switching to shelter, food, schooling, and psychological care. The spotlight is also on accountability. 113 arrest warrants have been issued in connection with the construction of these buildings that collapsed, and at least 12 people have been arrested, including contractors. CNN News 18's Siddhant Mishra has been traveling the length and breadth of Turkey to bring you the ground reality. This is his report.
This is the custom gate where I am reporting from. Millions of people have come on the streets after the devastating earthquake. Many have lost their lives. And in fact, this is one crucial place where we are reporting from, because like this, there are 3 gates which have been opened by the government of Turkey so that humanitarian aid can reach Syria. And this development has taken place in last 3 days. We are perhaps one of the few channels reporting from Turkey-Syria border.
There is one estimate that the destruction that happened in Turkey can be those cities, that destruction can be rebuilt in 3 years. But as far as Syria is concerned, it is going to take 10 years to get life back to normal. This is what reports are saying. In fact, the Russian army is also present in Syria. They are helping Bashar al-Assad government to fight war against the rebel forces. They are also carrying out the rescue works. Then UK government has funded white helmets. These are the gates through which supplies are reaching Syria. Now look at the truck which is passing by. Now that truck is taking the supplies inside the Syria. You can see this picture, these footages are relief for millions of people, those who are awaiting supplies.
As you see, the situation of Syria and Syrian people is very bad, and they are very, very poor. they need first aid and help. So the Barzan Charity Foundation coming from Kurdistan and send many supplies, medical supplies, relief supplies to them, and helping them is we helped them, and we are going to help them, and we carry on. We keep going to Syria and help them. So the trucks are coming from Kurdistan. The supplies are going to Afrin and Sheikh Hadid, Jandris, and every place that is affected from earthquake. But as you see, the situation in Syria is some sensitive, and we need to act sensitively.
Well, now we are going to show report from a city, from a heart of a city, which has turned into mountain of debris. I'm talking about a province in Turkey known as Kerman Maras.
You can see the setup has been made where food is being distributed. In fact, there are a lot of people, those who have become homeless. They are also sleeping on the roads, and in fact, they are also roaming around here. This entire stretch is completely devastated. It is going to take many years for this city to be rebuilt. And in fact, it is going to be a very challenging job for the government here to rebuild this city of Maras, this old town of Maras. We are reporting from the center of the city, and behind me you can see this publicity board which is not operational. It's written there, Kahraman Maras Cosmopolitan. So Kahraman Maras is one cosmopolitan city of Turkey. In fact, it is a province which is completely destructed, devastated. In fact, look around. Not a single building is in good condition. Half of the buildings have got collapsed. They have turned into a rubble, and some buildings are partially collapsed, and many other buildings have suffered cracks. And this is perhaps the reason that authorities have asked people to vacate these buildings, because it is not safe for them to live in these buildings anymore. So they are left to stay in ADAF shelter homes. I'm reporting from this camp which has been set up by government here, the government's disaster management agency, AFAD, and you can see the humanitarian aid, the relief material is being distributed here by many volunteers, the government, and in fact a lot of people from different parts of the world are sending relief material to Turkey, and those materials are being distributed here, which includes water, which includes food material to eat.
After this, we have also done a ground report from a city which is few kilometers away from Gaziantep, which is an epicenter. The name of the city is Antakya. And in fact, the Indian government teams, NDRF, is working on ground in Antakya. The entire city has been destructed, has been devastated. And in fact, people in this city have been asked to vacate the entire city, have been asked to vacate the entire neighborhood. Please watch this report which has been filed by me.
Antakya in Turkey is heavily devastated. We are reporting from the interiors of Antakya, building after building, complete destruction, enormous destruction that has taken place. And in fact, these areas, these neighborhoods have completely been evacuated by authorities. Nobody is living in these buildings. And in fact, there are some commandos from the authorities, those who have been given task here to keep law and order intact. Otherwise, look at the destruction. Now, this is the level of destruction. And one can imagine the intensity with which the quake struck the city of Antakya. Now, you can see the debris on the cars parked here. This is a residential locality where we are reporting from. The entire multi-story building has come down, has collapsed. The rescue operation has got over there. Then there you see two vehicles, two SUVs have come under the debris. It is going to take more than 1 year to clear all the debris in Antakya.
Well, we are right now on Turkey-Syria border. In fact, I would like to show this for our viewers that how trucks are finally entering Syria. Look at these 3 trucks which are right at the toll gates and are going to enter Syria. We are bringing this report for our viewers. These trucks are loaded with humanitarian aid and medical supplies. So the formality is currently being done by the authorities here. These 3 trucks are lined up here. Now these 3 trucks have been approved by the authorities, and look there. This is how the formalities take place here at this custom gate, and the formalities are currently going on. This is one foundation in Turkey which is sending help to Syria. So like this, trucks are finally being allowed, and this is not one gate. In fact, there are 2 other gates which include Bab al-Hawa and the other one more gate. So in total, 3 gates have been opened by Turkey so that the supplies can reach Syria.
Well, millions of people have been made to leave their homes and live in tents. Right now, we are reporting from Zone 4. So the entire Turkey has been divided into 7 zones. We are reporting from Zone 4, which is Nur Dagi, one of the worst affected areas of this country. And in fact, people, the survivors, are left to live in tents in this bitter cold. Children, women, men, all are left to live in these tents which have been set up here by AFAD, the highest body of disaster management in the country. And in fact, you can see the way they are cooking food right outside their tent, and this is how these families have been living from last 1 week.
Well, going by the report of United Nations, then before this earthquake, there were more than 4.5 million people relying on humanitarian aid. Now, after the earthquake, more 5.3 million people have been added to the list of humanitarian aid. In fact, one UN report also suggests that it is going to take almost 10 years for the government in Syria, or for that matter, the other powers controlling Syria, to rebuild the country.